Welcome back, ladies. Tier 9 Operator TV, out here in the wild operating for episode 2. So today we have a special treat. The United States Special Operations Command is currently testing and evaluating Shell Shock Technology casing here. So you might ask yourself, why are they testing and evaluating something other than brass? Like, brass has been the standard case to load for, I don't know, thousands of years. I think going back to like before the Civil War. So anyways, what are some of the claims on the Shell Shock that are appealing to SOCOM? Well, to start, 30% reduction in weight. What does that really mean for us? Not a whole lot for what I do now. Flat range, run around, try to be cool, shoot a little bit. But for the military and for SOCOM, that's a huge advantage. If I can see a 30% reduction in weight on this casing, I'm going to see an overall reduction in weight. What does that mean? Logistically, I'm going to be able to move things that are lighter and more. I guess it's not even deer season yet. People dropping deers out here. Anyways, we'll ask them to stop that in a second. I apologize. So again, that reduction in weight for the logistics, that's huge. It can move either more product at what you were able to move previously at the same weight, or you can just reduce the weight that you're moving and have the same amount of product. Second, in terms of my kit, if I'm out here, I have my combat loadout 6 mags at 30 rounds each, 180 rounds, and now I can see a reduction in weight to where maybe I can add, let's just say, 2 full mags, and then I'm still at the same weight, or I can actually just keep my standard loadout and have less pain in my back when I'm humping around. So that's just really the main appeal in terms of weight. Second, this, according to Shell Shock, is going to have thinner walls and it's stronger than brass. So what does that mean? Well, I can get more powder in here. I can get a larger charge. What does that larger charge equate to? More FPS. So with FPS, what do we get? We get more lethality down range. We can kind of extend the range and max effective range of our current weapon. So if we're running a 14.5 carbine, we may be able to stretch it out at a more effective, repeatable hit percentage to, let's just say, 650, 700, maybe 6. It just depends on your individual rifle setup. With that, there's been some kind of comments I've seen when I was researching Shell Shock Technology about, well, if I see an increase in FPS, which they're claiming about 150, 200 feet per second, well, barrel life, barrel wear. Okay, well, started thinking about that, and I was like, man, that is a little bit of a maybe a disadvantage here, the trade-off. But I started to think, does my 20-inch SPR barrel have less life expectancy than my 14.5? I don't think so. Does it wear out quicker? Not that I'm aware of. And then if I were focusing only on Shell Shock, man, to burn one of my barrels out in one of my 5.56 guns, I'd be talking about probably $12,000 to $13,000 worth of Shell Shock 5.56. I'm probably never going to shoot that much ammo through one gun, let alone purchase that much of Shell Shock in the foreseeable future. And then if I do, and I have the ability to do that, my $400 barrel has to get replaced. I mean, it seems like a pretty fair trade-off there. One of the other marketable features of this is it's a 2-piece construction, and you can kind of see it here at the bottom. So the casing itself is nickel alloy, and you can kind of see here where the cup has its groove. That is stainless steel. So it's a 2-piece construction. Very interesting when you compare it directly to a brass casing. Just something you're not used to seeing if you're familiar with 5.56 223. So we're not going to do a ton of talking on this. We're not affiliated with Badlands Munitions, who we purchased these from. We're going to run through some standard 55 grain training ammo from Badlands. I call it training ammo. It's not their precision stuff. And we're going to compare it to the Shell Shock 55 grain. We're not looking for accuracy because that's still going to depend on you as a shooter and your weapon setup. This is not going to increase that. I can tell you that now. But we're going to look at, does it actually increase FPS? We're also going to compare some 70 grain Barnes TSX projectiles in the brass form from Badlands Munitions as well to some 70 grain TSX from Barnes and Shell Shock. And then finally, we're going to compare Badlands 77 grain, some of their precision ammo, to the Shell Shock 77 grain SMKs, as well as we just happen to have some MagTech on hand 77 grain. One of the reasons we're only really featuring kind of Badlands versus Badlands is I know these were loaded in the same process, so I think it's a little bit more of a direct comparison between Shell Shock and brass. And it's just the ammo we shoot here on the channel. It's just what we had on hand. So we're going to get to it. Hopefully this guy that's over here cracking off his 30-06 rounds, hoping to put a deer down next week when rifle season starts, slows down, so we can get this film, take a look at the FPS, and see if the claims are valid. All right, the shooting is done. We've gathered the data on the 14.5 and the 16-inch Knights Armament SR15s. We took them out to the range. We compared 55 grain, 70 grain, and 77 grain brass casings versus Shell Shock. Now we're going to put some of those numbers to a test. We're going to hyper focus on the Sierra Match King 77 grain and look at what does the velo difference do for us at range. We're going to plug some numbers into a ballistic calculator and we're going to show you guys the results.
All right, we have all the data plugged into our Applied Ballistics app. This is based on the 77 grain MagTech moving at 2,560 feet per second out of the Knights Armament SR15 with the 16-inch barrel. So the app is calling for 5.81 mils of elevation at 600 yards, which is going to equal 125.5 inches that we are accounting for when we dial up 5.81 mils at that distance. Moving over to our 77 grain Badlands Shell Shock ammo out of the same rifle is moving at an average of 2,775.3 feet per second. In our Applied Ballistic app here at the 600-yard line, you can see it's calling for 4.76 mils of elevation, which at 600 yards is going to equal 102.8 inches. So Shell Shock is moving roughly 215 feet per second faster, which is calling for 1.05 mils less elevation. And at 600 yards, that's 22.7 inches. So pretty significant difference there at the 600-yard line between the two, the 77 grain MagTech and the brass casing, vice the Badlands Shell Shock 77 grain.
All right, ladies, let's wrap this up. You just saw on the Applied Ballistic app, we typed in the numbers, 77 grain projectile, Shell Shock versus brass.
just a little bit over a 200 FPS difference. That at 600 yards equated to roughly just a hair over 20 inches. That's crazy. A different casing, a larger charge because there's more case volume. Just same pressures, and you're getting 200 FPS, a little bit more faster on a 77 grain projectile. I know you saw the numbers on the 55 grain. That was crazy. However, it's up to you. You as the shooter, you as the viewer, you're gonna have to decide, is the increase in price and cost on the Shell Shock loaded ammo worth it, depending on what you're doing? I don't know. That's for you to answer. However, a majority of our comparison today was on Badlands until the 77 grain. We just happened to have some brass mag tech on hand, so that was the direct comparison between that and the Shell Shock. Badlands is just what we shoot here on the channel. A really good friend of the channel, been a good friend of mine for about 10 years. 110 SAS actual. He has a disco there, 110 SAS. It saves the homies 10% on ammo, so we definitely utilize that here. Try to shoot as much as we can. If you're interested in the breakdown on different barrel lengths, we only did the 14.5 and the 16. He actually did a pretty in-depth video, which is where we saw this firsthand and got the data and just wanted to see for ourselves with our own comparison. I'll link it in the first pinned comment, as well as I'll put a lot of the data that we pulled here on this video. That way you can just review it. And drop a like and a comment if you want to see us do a comparison here next on the 308 brass versus 308 Shell Shock. Just let us know. Thanks.